So hello, everyone. Today, then it's we are going to be talking about dreams, part 3, okay? And it's the final part for, at least for these meetings, but it's going to be very interesting. So I'll just share my screen, Mariana. Let's see if I'm able to. I'm disabled here, it says. Okay. Let me just try. Okay. Is that all right? Everybody can see? Great. So just to tell anyone that are, watching later on, we are going to be talking and giving examples and clarifying better the interconnections between Karl Gustav Jung's psychology and the Spiritist knowledge brought by Joanna de Angelis and other, and Allan Kardec, that we were seeing in the previous meeting. And we are going to stop the recording after the presentation so that people at home can share dreams if they would like, okay? So this is part 3. Well, I'm going to mix some of the slides that we saw last meeting so that we can have the examples and understand better what Joanna de Angelis and Allan Kardec were telling us about dreams, okay? So we saw this in the book Life, Challenges and Solutions, that Joanna de Angelis in chapter 7, Discover the Unconscious, tells us one can find all the experiences of the individual start up in the unconscious, from his or her first expressions across the periods of development and evolution, and up to the moment of the lucidity of logical thought, in which he or she now lives, with the goal of attaining the highest level, that for Joanna is cosmic thought. Okay, this is very, very important. She's talking not only about this life, but about all our evolution, okay, and that all the experiences are stored up in the unconscious. So let's see what are the consequences of this. Well, and Joanna de Angelis says that for Sigmund Freud, as well as for Carl Jung, the unconscious only expresses itself by means of symbols, and using the delicate mechanisms of dreams and active imagination, these symbols can and should be sought out in order to be rightly interpreted so that their messages may be understood. Dreams offer content that needs to be interpreted to facilitate the individual's development. So for Joanna, she agrees with Freud and Jung that we have to, that the unconscious expresses itself by symbols, and then that the mechanism of dreams and active imagination, we use this, the unconscious use this delicate mechanism so that we should try to understand their messages, okay, message of the dreams, and interpret these symbols, okay, because this facilitates our individual development. So let's see one of Jung's dreams in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. So Carl Jung is his autobiography. He says, while I was working on this book, the book was The Psychology of the Unconscious, that gave it some mark, okay, that was the start of the split that happened between Jung and Freud. So I had dreams which presaged the forthcoming break with Freud. One of the most significant had its scene in a mountainous region of the Swiss-Austrian border. It was evening, and I saw an elderly man in the uniform of an imperial Austrian customs official. He walked past, somewhat stooped, without paying any attention to me. His expression was peevish, rather melancholic and vexed. There were other persons present, and someone informed me that the old man was not really there, but was the ghost of a customs official who had died years ago. He is one of those who still couldn't die properly. Okay, a voice tells you. This is a summary of the dream, but you can go and look in Memory Dreams Reflection in the chapter where Jung talks about his breakup with Freud. So Jung says, I set about analyzing this dream in connection with customs. I at once thought of the word censorship. In connection with border, I thought of the border between consciousness and the unconscious, on the one hand, and between Freud's views and mine on the other. As for the old customs official, his work had obviously brought him so little that was pleasurable and satisfactory that he took a sour view of the world. I could not refuse to see the analogy with Freud. And of course, I chose this dream because we are talking also about ghosts in the dream, okay? So a little bit more about Jung's analysis of his own dream. We know that by that time, Jung thought that Freud was wiser and more experienced than himself, and that he should only listen to what he said, to what Freud had to say, and learn from him. But to his surprise, he found himself dreaming with Freud as a peevish official of the imperial Austrian monarchy, as a defunct and still walking ghost of a customs inspector. The dream recommended a rather more critical attitude toward Freud. The dream could be regarded as a corrective, as a compensation. Remember when we talked the first meeting about dreams, that one of the functions of the dream is to compensate the partiality of consciousness. So here Jung thought that this dream was also a compensation or antidote for his conscious high opinion and admiration of Freud. Therefore, the dream recommended a rather more critical attitude towards Freud. Because, of course, we know, since he was talking about and writing about psychology of the unconscious, where he would dive deeper into the unconscious and get to the collective unconscious. So we say that because Jung was heading towards the definition and exploration of the collective unconscious, so towards the history of successive layers of consciousness, and in opposition, of course, to Freudian's statements about the existence of only a personal unconscious in the psyche, okay? So this is very important, that this dream is one of the dreams that Jung had that predict for himself the breakup with Freud. So let's go on. So at that time, Freud, we know, had lost much of his authority for me, Jung says, but he still meant to me a superior personality upon whom I projected the Father, okay? Where such a projection occurs, remember everyone, the mechanisms of defense of the ego. So Jung's talking about projection. So where such a projection occurs, and just to clarify, the projection of the complex of the father or mother is a very strong one, right? It involves a lot of things, the inner child, so insecurity and other stuff, fears of rejection and things like that. So Jung says where such a projection occurs, we are no longer objective. We persist in a state of divided judgment. On the one hand, we are dependent, as the child is dependent of the father, okay? And on the other, we have resistance, of course, because there is a criticism, there is something that it's not okay. We are like, there is a dissociation, we can say, because everything that is projected is not whole within us, not conscious yet, okay? So on the one hand, we are dependent, and on the other, we have resistances. When the dream took place, I still thought highly of Freud, but at the same time, I was critical of him. This divided attitude is a sign that I was still unconscious of the situation and had not come to any resolution of it. This is characteristic of all projections. This is very important when we are projecting onto anyone, some of our conflicts, of our inner objects, we can say, our complexes. When we are projecting, we are dissociated, so we are not whole in that question. So we haven't made yet consciousness about all the complexity, the different aspects that many times are in opposition, because otherwise we would be whole. Of course, there is kind of an inner war within ourselves when we dissociate and project onto someone or some situation, some aspect that it's not resolved within us yet. So Jung says that this divided attitude is a sign that I was still unconscious of the situation and had not come to any resolution of it. This is characteristic of all projections. The dream urged upon me the necessity of clarifying this situation. But the dream had not reached its end with the episode of the customs of official. After a hiatus came a second and far more remarkable part. I was in an Italian city, and it was around noon, between 12 and 1 o'clock. But he says in the description of this dream that it was an Italian city, and at the same time it was Basel, the city where he was born, and his family was from there. Okay, so it was a mixture. Many times there is information that it's compiled, we could say that it's integrated in one symbol. That's why we have to stay a long period of time with the symbols of our dreams. So a fierce sun was beating down upon the narrow streets. A crowd came streaming towards me, and I knew that the shops were closing and people were on their way home. In the midst of this stream of people walked a knight in full armor. He mounted the steps towards me. He wore a helmet of the kind that is called a bassinet, with eye slits and chain armor. Over this was a tunic into which was wove, front and back, a large red cross. Beautiful image. One can easily imagine how I felt. Suddenly to see in a modern city, during the noonday rush hour, a crusader coming towards me. What struck me as particularly odd was that none of the many persons walking about seemed to notice him. It was as though he were completely invisible to everyone but me. I asked myself what this apparition meant, and then it was as if someone answered me, but there was no one there to speak. Yes, this is a regular apparition. The night always passes by here between 12 and 1 o'clock, and has been doing so for a very long time, for centuries, I gathered, and everyone knows about it. So the voice, okay, capital V, usually for Jung is one of the ways that the self, capital S, appears in a dream, okay? So the knight and the customs official were contrasting figures. The customs official was shadowy, someone who still couldn't die properly, a fading apparition. The knight, on the other hand, was full of life and completely real. The second part of the dream was numinous in the extreme, whereas the scene on the border had been prosaic and in itself not impressive. I had been struck only by reflections upon it. This is very important. Remember when Professor Corbett was talking to us about numinous dreams, right? So this part of the dream with the night was very, very numinous to Jung. So Jung says, in the period following these dreams, I did a great deal of thinking about the mysterious figure of the night. Even in the dream, I knew that the night belonged to the 12th century. That was the period when alchemy was beginning, and also the quest for the Holy Grail. Isn't that beautiful? And Jung developed in his works what we call the alchemy metaphor. Okay, he uses alchemy as a great metaphor of the development of consciousness and also of our search and of the psychotherapeutic process itself and our search for ego self access, our search for enlightenment, for meeting or in a certain way to talking better with ourselves, capital S. Okay, so a lot of metaphors in alchemy. So the stories of the Grail had been of the greatest importance to me ever since I read them. At the age of 15, for the first time, I had an inkling that a great secret still lay hidden behind those stories. Therefore, quite natural to me that the dream should conjure up the world of the Knights of the Grail and their quest. For that was, in the deepest sense, my own world, which had scarcely anything to do with Freud's. My whole being was seeking for something still unknown, which might confer meaning upon the banality of life. So Jung was seeking and was diving, as we said, into this ocean, getting to the deepest part, the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, as Professor Corbett and many Jungians of us, Jungian analysts, call the collective unconscious, because there lays, okay, he was seeking for something still unknown, which might confer meaning. So there lays meaning upon the banality of life. And then, I don't know if you know this book, The Myth of Meaning, in the work of C.G. Jung. It's beautiful, from Aniela Jaffe. one of Jung's closest collaborator. And then she says, summing up everything that Jung says about meaning, that the experience of meaning depends on the awareness of a transcendental or spiritual reality that complements the empirical reality of life, and together with it forms a whole. That's why we Jungian analysts, we look for the numinous in the dreams, okay? Because it's so important, this awareness of a transcendental and or spiritual reality, okay, because this makes life whole. So we should think all the effort of spirituality with the beautiful souls that are being channeling all over the world, you know, asking us to look at that, to look at the importance that lays within ourselves, not outside of ourselves, it's within ourselves. So then we come to Joanna de Angelis again, in that chapter, Discovering the Unconscious, where she is going to say that Freud and Jung assert that formidable forces are at play in the extraordinary ocean, the unconscious, sometimes for and sometimes against the individual, who must decipher all of these mysteries in order to achieve both inner and outer self-realization. The unconscious contains the myths, fantasies, legends, and superstitions of all peoples of the past and present. And in its deepest corners, look what beautiful sentence, parallel personalities are born, our complexes in this life, for instance, our inner child from this life, for instance, our mother complex, father complex from this life. So parallel personalities are born or sleep. So we could say that when Joanna is saying or sleep, she's talking about complexes from past lives, right? Personalities that incorporate themselves into the individual's existence, generating conflicts and neurotic disorders. That's why we need so much to know ourselves. However, according to them, the objective of interpreting such messages is not to immediately resolve neurotic disorders, but to rightly utilize their forces, the forces of, this, all the symbols, these mysteries, these complexes, these personalities, okay? So the objective of interpreting such messages is not immediately resolve neurotic disorders, but to rightly utilize their forces, which bear energies for growth, elevation, knowledge, and liberation. It's not something that we should, overlook, people, because it's everything there, everything that we need to the cosmic consciousness that Joanna was talking about is within us, not outside of us. So what made such questions last meeting? So now we can come together and think of what Allan Kardec asked the spirits. And I just took a quick look. The spirit book, so it's 1857, and Freud was born in 1856, 1 year previously to the spirit's book. So there was no psychology developed as a science. We have to pay attention to that. Of course, they were talking in a sense that we could understand, and Allan Kardec and everybody could understand for many, many years to come. And now us in the 21st century, to put everything together and to understand from the perspective of what they actually wanted us to think. That's what Joanna is trying to tell us now. They wanted us to think now, today, and for years to come, and young people that are watching us, okay? So let's go. We are heading towards cosmic consciousness. And you all know that I love Star Trek and all this stuff. So I think, like, cosmic conscious, we are going to get there at some point. So in chapter 8 that we were talking about last meeting, when Kardec talks about, and the spirits, about the emancipation of the soul, remember? In question 401, when talk about sleep and dreams, he asked the spirits, does the soul rest during sleep as does the body? And they answered, no, a spirit is never inactive. The bonds that tie it to the body are relaxed during slumber. And as the body does not require its presence, it travels through space and has direct relationships with other spirits. So we are going to see this, what happened to Jung in his next dream, that it's exactly what the spirits are telling Kardec, okay? But this is Kardec's summing up what the spirits were saying. In question 402, how can we prove a spirit is freedom during sleep? And in the end of the spirit's answers, Kardec makes as a small abstract. Dreams are a consequence of the emancipation of the soul. Souls have more independence by the suspension of the active and social life, of course, because then the ego, goes in altered state of consciousness, and enjoy indefinite clairvoyance extending to faraway places or those we have never seen, or even to other worlds. But here we know about, later on, by the teachings of the spirits that Chico Xavier, Divaldo, Pereira Franco, and many other mediums all around the world channeled, that of course this indefinite clairvoyance depends on the evolution of the spirit itself, okay? So it's indefinite, and we can achieve in another, when we are really evolved, let's say, but it's step by step. But anyway, we have much more clairvoyance extending to faraway places or those we have never seen, or even to other worlds. This emancipation is what causes the reminiscence that retraces the events from our present or prior lives. The peculiarity of the images of what has taken place in worlds unknown to us, to the ego, mixed with the present world, the world that the ego is living, produces bizarre and whimsical patchworks that seem to be devoid of meaning. It's a way that the spirits are talking previously to the development of psychology about the symbols, right? So that we can also understand that the symbols have what we saw previously about the symbols. Of course, they have meanings that probably in this life will not be fully known to ourselves, to us, okay? Why? Because we don't have this clairvoyance, this understanding that when we are free of the bodies we have when in spirit. So the symbols is the way that our spirit, the self, capital S, that Joanna says that is the spirit, the self, capital S, Jung self, is the spirit for Joanna. So the spirit is trying to talk, let's say, to the ego through symbols, and in such a way that it will make an impression in the ego, that the ego will occupy itself with trying to understand the symbols. And Jung did this a lot. He stayed many years with his dreams, okay? So in Memory Dreams Reflections, we see exactly that, one of Jung's dreams with his deceased father. So Jung says, 6 weeks after his death, my father appeared to me in a dream. Suddenly he stood before me and said that he was coming back from his holiday. He had made a good recovery and was now coming home. I thought he would be annoyed with me for having moved into his room, but not a bit of it. Nevertheless, I felt ashamed because I had imagined he was dead. 2 days later, the dream was repeated. My father had recovered and was coming home, and again I reproached myself because I had thought he was dead. Later, I kept asking myself, what does it mean that my father returns in dreams and that he seems so real? It was an unforgettable experience, and it forced me for the first time to think about life after death. I think this is great because you see, pay attention to what Jung says. Jung asks himself what, of course, there are psychological issues. Jung was young. I think he was like 20 something when his father died. He was, or even a little before 20, he was just, had just got into medical school. And yeah, around 20, and he had moved to his father's room. Of course, there was a psychology, there was some conflict in there, but see that what Jung says, and of course there's a symbolism that the father is okay, is coming from a holiday and all that, but there is something very important for us to understand here. Jung kept asking himself, what does it mean that my father returns in dreams and that he seems so real? He seems so real. So it's the connection, because we say that it's the ego in the dream, a representation of the ego in the dream, the way that we perceive ourselves in the dream. And Jung thought, what does that mean? And why his father was so real to him. So it's the impact, okay? It's kind of a little different. Do you see about the night, for instance? The night has a numinous quality. And here Jung is not telling anything about numinous, quality, but about like a vision, okay, and a very real vision. So he said it was an unforgettable experience, and it forced him to think for the first time about life after death. So it's this quality of something being very real for the ego, for our experience here, that can tell us about an apparition, let's say, about a visitation, as we could call. And I brought to you this great book, C.G. Jung and the Dead, Visions, Active Imagination, and the Unconscious Terrain, by Stephanie Stephens. This book is based on her PhD thesis, okay? It's a very great book. And she talks a lot about the literal and the symbolic in dreams, okay? And her thesis is defending that sometimes, as we are going to see, okay, the apparitions or the visions in the dream, the images, better saying, the images in the dream are symbolic, and sometimes they have a quality that we could say that, no, this is a visitation dream, this is literal. We have met this person in the dream. So let's see what Stephanie Stephens tells us about that. She says that offering an alternative to the symbolic approach allows the dead to point to themselves as a psychic material. I think this is a great insight that she had. Therefore, increasing the timing and psychological effect of their appearance. The dead played a central, if neglected, role in pointing Jung to themselves and to the formulation of unconscious dynamics that we have been studying here together, right? So Jung engaged in a process of entering the space of the unconscious, perceiving, seeing, and then seeing further and further. think this is great also, the way that she expresses. So diving deeper in the unconscious. And she says the theme of the dead began in Jung's childhood and manifested itself provocatively in 1896 with his father's dream 6 weeks after his death that we have just seen, and a brief resolution with the appearance of the dead in writing Septem Sermones ad Mortus, 7 Sermons of the Dead, in 1916. It's great. If anyone wants to read, it's Jung's 7 Sermons of the Dead. It's like, I think it's like a psychography, Jung's, you know, of course. And it's the whole paranormal phenomena when somebody knocks on the door and he goes and opens the door and there was nobody there. And he feels the dead entering his house. It's great, people. Read that. So during this time, it was the dead who showed Jung the nature of figures of the unconscious in a series of dreams and visions of death. He made this distinction in his chapter on life after death, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, okay? When he talks so much about the figures of the unconscious and that other group, often indistinguishable between the two, the spirits of the departed. So the figures of the unconscious and the spirits of the departed are often for Jung indistinguishable between them. For their part, they not only pointed Jung to the unconscious as a site of exploration, but they also pointed to themselves as separate and distinct entities. I think this is great, her insight. So they guided him to discover layers of the unconscious, both personal and collective, and to the life-filled aspect of the unconscious itself, full of life. The dead remained a consistent presence in his discoveries and facilitated for him the ability to explore and define the workings of the unconscious. This is beautiful, I think, because it's exactly why, and also Joanna and all the spirits that we could say, okay, the spirits of the departed. Joanna was, and we are going to see in last class, okay, in last meeting, her reincarnations. And many of the mentors that worked with Chico Xavier and other mediums around the globe, many times they talk about their past lives as reincarnated souls. So they are pointed, they are not doing all of this just for us to have some fun and ask if, are there spiritual realms or not? No, they are doing what they did to Jung, to call attention to the dynamics of the unconscious, what we are trying to do in all these meetings and in Joanna's different groups, studying her psychology and the spiritist knowledge and spiritualist knowledge also in different cultures, that why are they showing, us this path? Because for us here, when we are reincarnated, everything, look at the life that happens in the unconscious, look at the amount of information about ourselves, about our evolution, about consciousness. So how can we, just be looking outside social medias and this and that and not thinking deeply about ourselves? So I think this is very, very important, because that's the way is within, as Jung says, as Joanna says, and such wonderful souls are trying to show us, not, going outside of ourselves. So let's go ahead. So then Joanna says that we would like to take the liberty to add, however, that through concentration, prayer, and meditation, as we have just been talking about, as well as during some mediumistic trances, so altered states of consciousness, the unconscious can find additional means to facilitate the release of various feelings that are connected, of course, with experiences and memories that lie within it, giving rise to the anemic, so the psychic phenomenon, right? We have seen that, so carefully studied by the esteemed codifier of Spiritism, Allan Kardec. One of the identifiers of the archives of the unconscious, although under a different label, because in that period, again, there was no psychology yet as a science, okay? So Stephen says that Jung described in a letter to Erich Neumann, another great Jungian analyst, right after Emma Jung's death. Look at what a beautiful experience. 2 days before the death of my wife, I had what one can only call a great illumination, which, like a flash of lightning, lit up centuries-old secret that was embodied in her, and had exerted an unfathomable influence on my life. And you are going to see why. I can only suppose that the illumination came from my wife, who was then mostly in a coma, and that the tremendous lightening up and release of insight had a retroactive effect upon her, and was one reason why she could die such a painless and royal death. This experience has been a great comfort to me, but the stillness and the audible silence about me, the empty air and the infinite distance are hard to bear. So when he talks about illumination, he's talking about the self, right? And you are going to see what was the secret that he was sharing, and his wife was in a coma. So how come he was sharing this experience of illumination with his wife in a coma? Let's see here again what Joanna is telling us. She takes the liberty to add, however, that through concentration, prayer, and meditation, as well as during some mediumistic trances, we can say that there Jung was in an altered state of consciousness, as well as Emma Jung. And they were communicating, okay, not through the brain, because Emma's brain, she was dying, she was in a coma. But so who was communicating with whom? Of course, the spirit of both of them. Isn't that wonderful? So this experience of illumination is of course the self capital S. So it's the spirit. But okay, and Emma Jung had a royal death, a painless death. But Jung, so that was a comfort to Jung. But the stillness and the audible silence about me, the empty air and the infinite distance are hard to bear. So that was his ego, okay? The feeling, missing Emma, and the stillness, the audible silence, that was all felt through the ego. Then we come to Kardec again. Question 407, is complete sleep necessary for the emancipation of the spirit? No, the spirit recovers its freedom as soon as the senses become drowsy. It takes advantage of every moment of body rest to be free. The second that the body begins to get weary, the spirit detaches from the body. The weaker the bodily state, the freer the spirit. Emma was dying. Her body was really weak. Okay, her brain was out. So her spirit was free. And she was able to communicate, and also Jung was able to get in communication with her because he himself was in an altered state of consciousness. So let's go back to Stephen Stephens. The conditions surrounding Emma's passing seem to locate her in another level. This could be likened to the difference between personal dreams and what we call Jungian big dreams, the numinous dreams, the latter stemming from deeper in the unconscious. Here we have an insinuation that the dead inhabit various levels of the unconscious, either closer to consciousness or further away, and perhaps dependent on their plans next. This is very important for us to understand the various levels of the unconscious and where the dead inhabit, okay? Remember the transpersonal level of the psyche. So it's the transpersonal because the ego is not participating, only very, a very distant place, because there is the self that predominates, okay? So the great illumination that Jung experienced with Emma launched her further or deeper into another level of the unconscious, perhaps due to what might follow next in her life as a member of the deceased. Jung reflects on this. He says, certain souls feel three-dimensional existence, this existence of the ego, to be more blissful than eternity. Perhaps that depends upon how much of completeness or incompleteness they have taken across with them. Isn't that great? I think this is something really important for us to think about, because we were questioning ourselves last meeting. Oh, but how come is that? So I died, but am I a symbol in someone's dreams? My husband, my daughter, son, whatever, brother, sister, or am I really talking to them? Or either or, right? Or and. Doesn't have to be one or the other, because we are talking about different layers of the unconscious, okay? But people communications is at least between two entities, right? Two consciousness, or more than two. Of course, it's a road of going up and down, let's say. So we have to pay attention of the spirit that is communicating, or the complex, you want to say, the projection, if it is like the night, the ghost, or the customs official, like complexes, Jung complexes, or the night, a representation of something deeper in his own psyche, very numinous, or a visitation like the dream with Jung's father, okay? So, but the ghosts, let's say, the apparitions have their own purpose too when it is a visitation, let's say. And that's what Stephanie Stephens is talking about, okay? So not only does this indicate how Jung thought about such conditions experienced by the deceased, but also speculates as to the various types of conditions that might influence and hold meaning in the next stage in death, okay? Because the spirit that is trying to communicate also has a purpose, also has a development, also wants to send a message, right? And it depends on his stage even of consciousness. So here Jung confirms von Franz, one of other very close of his analysts and friends, von Franz's assertion that the unconscious acts as if it continues after life and into death. Emma's passing seemed to be influenced by a level and degree of consciousness she embodied while alive, because Emma was studying about the Holy Grail. I don't wanted to give spoilers, but anyway, okay, so let's see more about that. So Jung refers to one of his most meaningful dreams in the chapter on life after death. which occurred in 1956, close to a year after Emma's death. So you know that the ego, we say in psychiatry and psychology that mourning, the process of mourning takes around a year, okay? The ego is kind of occupied with the mourning and all what's going on in the unconscious dynamics close to a year, but that was close to a year after Emma's death, at a time when he was able to make contact with her. Jung relays how he awoke one night knowing for certain that he had been with Emma, for certain, that he had been with Emma in the south of France, and was touched that she was still working on her Grail scholarship. Jung felt that the dream revealed the potential for the soul's growth after death. I want after death to be with Joanna de Angelis. You can look for me there if you want. If I deserve, I will be in my scholarship with Joanna there, people. So, because of course consciousness go on, and we will go on studying and analyzing and talking about, and with our group studies and whatever, when after passing, okay? So let's see. Jung acknowledged that a symbolic interpretation fell so short of what he had experienced as their time together. Thus, a visitation with the deceased Emma is how he interpreted the other in the unconscious, where the dreaming and death mingle. So let's go back to the Spirit's book, question 404. What should we think of the significance attributed to dreams? Have you not heard of the many instances proving that individuals may appear to friends and family in dreams, warning them of what is happening to them? What are apparitions if not the soul or spirit of individuals who are communicating with you? When you are certain that what you saw, when you are certain, see how the spirits were talking also for us in the future. So when you are certain that what you saw has actually taken place, the capacity of, as Jung said, that was very real, for instance, in his father dream, and with this visitation with Emma Jung, it not proof that it was not a fragment of your shocking reunion. Jung understood life of the dead. The reassurance that Jung had from learning of Emma's continued study might have been due to the specific focus on the Grail vessel itself. Then a very potent symbol. The Grail was a symbol of a grave. More specifically, the grave of Christ is where the mysterious transition from death to life, the resurrection, took place. Thus, to have been with Emma seems to have enacted the very same Grail research that she had been pursuing in her life of the dead. Remember that he was reading about the Grail when he was 15 years old. So question 402, how can we prove a spirit's freedom during sleep? Sleep frees the soul, says the Spirit, partially from the body. When you sleep, your spirit is in the state in which you will find yourself after death. The spirits who are promptly freed from matter upon death are those who, during their life, as Emma Jung, had intelligent sleep. Such individuals meet with other spirits superior to themselves when asleep. They spend time with them, conversing and learning from them. They even work on undertakings in the spirit world that they discover to already be initiated or completed upon death. Based on this, you should see how death should not be feared, since you die daily. Then Stephen says there is one further instance important for the discussion. When Jung saw Emma in a dream-vision, he describes her as objective wise, objective, not subjective, and having her expression the entirety of their relationship. The vision was so moving for Jung that he defined it as purely objective and indicative of all projections and emotional ties removed. This is Emma's completed individuation. Her in such objectivity, a refined visioning was necessary on Jung's part. So the mourning period had already ended. That is, Jung's own projections and ties needed to be withdrawn. And only then would he be aware of the unconscious. And also, of course, people, when we see that Emma was studying in the afterlife, went on studying about the grail, the resurrection of Christ, that has all this symbolism, all this mystery of life. Okay, of course, she was in a different also level of evolution. After she didn't went to see our home, that Chico Xavier, because we know that our home, the colony, spiritual colony, is near the Shadowlands. Okay, so of course she wouldn't be there because she was studying already and she was evolved. And we know that she had a very hard marriage to Jung for different reasons. And I think she really individuated, because you see all the projections and emotional ties were removed. And we know that some spirits even passing, if we go we pass, we die with lots of complexes unsolved and resentment and hatred and this and that. Of course, we are not going to be vibrating in the way that Emma Jung was. So of course we are going to be near this level of consciousness that it's not that so great, let's say. Okay, so again, Joanna de Angelis, the big challenge for human existence lies in the ability to explore that unknown world, the unconscious, and take from it all the potential that may produce happiness and self-realization. Individuals usually go through life in an almost sleep-like state without any awareness of what is going on around them regarding events of their dynamics. Unfortunately, they rarely take time to reflect, to ponder the objectives and needs of life per se. Everything happens to them automatically, fortuitously, affected as they are by the predominant physiological urges, even during episodes of a psychological nature. Consequently, they live unconsciously, far removed from reality, scattered, piling up conflicts and letting themselves be controlled by their dominant instincts. Unfortunately, we see that a lot in our days still. So now, going to the end, I brought you a case report that I call the Sacred Medallion, that, of course, the patient gave me her authorization to divulge, and it's written in our book, Anomalous Experiences through the vision of the complex psychology of Karl Gustav Jung, that for the moment is edited only in Portuguese, okay? And this case report was presented in the 21st Congress of the International Association for Analytical Psychology in Vienna in 2019, right previously to the pandemic. and Professor Corbett, and also Professor Walter Bechat, who is one of the founders of the Association, Jungian Association of Brazil. But they both commented the case. And in our book is the written comments of Professor Lionel Corbett. But this is just the case report, okay? So I'll call M. M was a middle-aged housewife with important artistic gifts, married, 2 children, studying at university. The eldest son with presented clinical symptoms of depression and anxiety post-use of cannabis. The son's behavior became progressively aggressive towards his mother, including death threats, especially when both of them were together at home. So her feelings were in the moment when she searched for analysis was of they were of fear, humiliation, helplessness, and concern for her son. Upon starting psychotherapy, M was frail, insecure as how to act, and tearful. She felt diminished as a mother and guilty. M had been a very cheerful and sensitive young woman. She enjoyed poetry, contact with nature, arts, and music. Her mother had become an orphan at the age of 3 and had been raised in a boarding school run by nuns. She was the mother, her mother was much devoted to St. Mary. Since Emma was a child, there had happened to her phenomena that she couldn't explain. And then after 2 and something years of analysis, she has this dream. I am in my apartment where a party of something of the sort is taking place, because there are many people present and everyone seems happy. You then arrive and my mother hugs you and begins showing you the place. It makes me glad because I have a small child in my arms, my son. In the next scene, I see my mother hugging you again, and to my surprise, pulling out a chain necklace that was under your blouse and showing me a medallion with an image of St. Mary. My mother was smiling in a way she seldomly did in life. I think it's funny because I've never seen you with a St. Mary medallion, but rather always with a crucifix. At this point, I wake up with a great feeling of wellness. And this is the drawing, okay? We usually ask, and of course she has this artistic dreams, but we usually ask the patients if they would like to draw. This is the drawing of the dream. So here to my right is her mother, her deceased mother. This is me and the mother taking the medallion from under the blouse, and this is her, and you see that she looks young, right? And she's a middle-aged mother. And here's the son that also looks like a small boy. I don't know if you can see, the colors are like bluish and white and like gray, okay? And this is the medallion. Oops, how come we have the medallion, but wasn't it a dream? So let's see a little bit about this. This is the medallion. How do I know that? Because in the day of that session, I actually was wearing this medallion under my blouse. It was not like this, was a blouse that couldn't appear anything. And I had the crucifix on that I always used for many, many years. But this medallion was under my blouse. And it was the first time that I was wearing it. I had a spiritual meeting after my clinical practice, and I had just been given this medallion by one of my sisters. And you are going to see a little bit of the medallion history. So I was with the medallion under my blouse, and I wasn't thinking, I just remembered that I had a medallion, remember that this drawing was in a session later on. So she was just telling me about the dream. And automatically I said, a medallion like this? And then I just took the medallion. I didn't know, because I hadn't seen the image of the drawing. So I just took the medallion spontaneously from under my blouse. And she went pale. And she, you know, all the things that autonomic neurologic system happen to us when we have this, when we are scared. She went pale and she said, no, it's not like this medallion. It is this medallion. Okay, so that's what happened. So let's see a little bit of the story of the medallion. So the therapist's grandmother, deceased for 30 years, had been a very strong woman who, according to family accounts, had built her house with her own hands. In the following generations, she came to be known as a sort of Anahy is the name of the main character of a beautiful book. It's called Time and the Wind by one of our Gaúcho author, Érico Veríssimo. Gaúcho is from my land here in the very south of Brazil. So she was much devoted to Saint Mary, and on her last years of life, she wore on her neck a medallion in a chain with her image of Saint Mary on one side and the Sacred Heart on the other. Around 10 years after her passing, the therapist's sister, after their father's death, so 20 years, the grandmother was 30 years from the session that happened that I'm going to talk about, and the father's death, my father's death was 20 years after, had moved to London. People that are in London, we are talking about London, Brazil and London, lots of synchronicities, for her doctor's degree in architecture, and had started to occasionally frequent a spiritualist church some friends had mentioned, the London Spiritual Mission. I don't know if people in London know this church. Beautiful, I have been there later on. So I just brought to you here, you can Google it, the London Spiritual Mission, the 7 principles of spiritualism, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, communion of spirits, and the ministry of angels of this church, okay, people? The continuous existence of human soul, personal responsibility, compensation and retribution hereafter for all the good and evil deeds done on earth, eternal progress open to every human soul. Very close and actually more or less the same thing as Spiritist knowledge. And they say that in the site, these are principles and not commandments, for we have no fixed creed or dogma. We consider spiritualism a universal way of life which embraces all beliefs and origins. So the patient's dream occurs approximately 20 years after the session was recorded in the church. The medium, it was a German medium, and as for us Brazilians, her accent was really hard to understand. So the medium required only that each person brought with them a cassette tape, because the sessions were recorded and the tape given to the attendee. No fees were charged. And my sister didn't know this. You know, she was just going to church. She just put her name because there was a list of people, and this German medium would be in London and that for a week and would give seances or sessions. The audio of the mediumistic session was kept for more than 20 years by the therapist's sister and scanned with her permission. The following transcription is only from the part that refers to the medallion. I have it in audio, but I couldn't bring because I don't think the Zoom is able to, at least this link is able to, for you to listen. So this is the transcript of part of the mediumistic session. She used to wear, the medium, say the German medium. She never asked anything to my sister, okay? She used to wear sometimes. She's pointing, when she's talking about the medallion, she's pointing here, a brush, because she's putting her hand over and she's looking. Someone here in the earth has that brush. She would have liked you to have it. Will you find out this? Because she used to put her hand over it It was very precious to her. And I feel this brooch will be a lovely connection between you and your grandmother. When you touch it, you connect it to her. It's got her energy on it because she got a lot of strength from it, from that brooch, from what it symbolized, the symbol of it. This is why she's saying it lies in a box. She said somebody's got it in a box. I think it's your aunt. She's talking about your aunt. If she's not wearing it, I suggest perhaps you say, could I have it? You know, it's because she was a very strong woman, mentally very strong. And then you will have this link physically and that strength, okay? Nobody in the family had any idea, everybody had totally forgotten about the medallion. And when my sister came back to Brazil, she went to talk with, we have only 2 aunts, and talk to them and to see if they knew anything about a medallion, and then kind of reminded something and went to look and found the medallion in a box, okay? So that's the story of the medallion. And in the dream analysis of the patient, when we started analyzing and also the drawing that she made, in a previous dream on the day then the patient is saying, as she reminded about a previous dream on the day her mother passed away, and upon which she hadn't thought since. She was in a hospital bedroom with her mother, who was wearing a white gown. She was telling her that she shouldn't worry and that she should go through a door, which Em was pointing at, and everything would be fine. The mother was scared, but Em had held her hand and helped her walk to the door, calming her. At this point, she woke up with the phone ringing. She was informed that her mother had a heart attack and had to be taken in a hurry to the hospital. When she arrived there, her mother had already passed away. Em identified her problematic son. Look at the drawing, on the boy in her arms. Upon seeing him in the drawing, she understood that he had been seeking to cuddle up to her, as though asking for help, and she noticed she had drawn his hair covering his eyes. She felt that she might never have understood her son well. She noticed that she drew in white, gray, and blue because for her, the dream had a spiritual aura. But she only realized that when we analyzed the drawing, okay? She understood that her mother in the dream was showing her a way of strength and of reconnection with her motherly feelings and with her spirituality. In the follow-up, in the following months, Em was able to set more limits for her son in a loving way, without accepting his provocations. There was a significant improvement in her condition and an interruption in the aggressions. Gradually, she turned to voluntary work and to her religious community. She is currently asymptomatic. Actually, she's not even in analysis anymore. This is some years ago. So to finalize, so we can talk a little bit, I brought to you again Joanna when she says, the big challenge for human existence lies in the ability to explore that unknown world, the unconscious, and take from it the potential that may produce happiness and self-realization. Individuals usually go through life in an almost sleep-like state, without any awareness of what is going on around them regarding events of their dynamics. They rarely take time to reflect, to ponder the objectives and needs of life per se. Everything happens to them automatically, fortuitously, affected as they are by the predominant physiological urges, even during episodes of a psychological nature. So we have already seen that, but I wanted you to pay attention again to what Joanna is saying, considering, for instance, all that we have been talking about, Jung's dreams, all the dreams that Sylvia suggested to us, that it's in the WhatsApp group, that many of you have read by now, and on the Dreams in this Case reports, okay? And Joanna says that human existence is an invaluable learning experience that must not be wasted or lived utopically, as if it were a trip to Fantasyland, where everything has its place in a timeless, mechanical way devoid of sense or reason. The march of the evolutionary process is upward, and each day individuals must store up creative and enlightening experiences that will expand their field of development, leading them toward their cosmic destiny, complete freedom, plenitude. While in the body, they will suffer the positive or negative consequences of their acts, which are the building blocks of their future. That is why they must live consciously, awake to the reality of living. And finally, the last one, but the most important, it is in the unconscious that we find the presence of the spirit in the folds of the inner being. Remember everything that we've been talking, that Stephens talks about, impregnated with memories that do not reach the current conscious, and yet affect behavior indirectly, causing disquieting and unfamiliar states within the structure of the ego. See the reasons of our neurotic patterns and so on, so forth. Self-discovery, this group that we are trying to, study self-discovery, enables individuals to grasp the need for progress, while at the same time it disarticulates the difficulties that have been formed by negative past life experiences. Only upon beginning to experience and understand one's inner reality, engaging self-discovery, and remaining awake to the activity of logical and conscious thought, are the damaging effects of the past released finally, and new guidelines for future conduct set forth. Thank you so much, all that have been listening to this point, and I will stop sharing now, and we will stop recording, right, Mariana, so that